In this edition of Africa in History, we discuss the partitioning of Africa by European forces. Africa has always been a vast territory with huge mineral resources in almost every part of the continent. It thus became a location of attraction and more of a beautiful bride for the European forces to covet to themselves. It is still that beautiful bride for natural resources till today. Merchants began to move into the continent of Africa through the sea routes and settled mostly in the coastal areas where you have the sea, the vast oceans, and so on. And as of the 15th century, several European countries had their presence in most parts of Africa and had engaged actively in commerce with the local people. What then happened was that the interest of the European forces began to clash in most areas. The idea then arose to call for a conference in Berlin, Germany, to discuss the need to partition Africa among the European forces so as to avoid violent clashes of interest among the European forces. The meeting was held in 1884 in Berlin at the instance of the German Chancellor, Bismarck. As noted earlier, the sole agenda was to discuss and settle how European countries would claim territories in Africa to avoid conflicts and avoid the outbreak of war among the European countries. All the major European states were invited to the conference. Germany, France, Great Britain, Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, and Spain were all invited because they all had interest in Africa and had their men on ground. Denmark, Italy, Turkey, and Russia were also invited to take part in the discussion for the partitioning of Africa. The United States of America was also invited, owing to its then interest in Libya, but the United States was not interested in having a permanent colonial interest in the continent and therefore did not attend the conference. It is important to note that no African nation or representative was invited to the conference, neither were the African people aware of what was being discussed in faraway Germany against their territory by the European forces. In other words, the native African people had no say whatsoever in the partitioning of their land to European forces. It has been reported that the partitioning of Africa was done by the display of the map of Africa on the wall in a room occupied by the competing European interest. So it was more of a point-and-take kind of situation where each representative simply pointed at the location that he considered dear to his country, and the location was given to them, subject to a few deliberations. In the end, the countries in Africa were partitioned as follows: Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, French Equatorial Africa, and Madagascar were given to France, and that is why most of these countries are French-speaking countries till today. Libya, Eritrea, and Somaliland were given to Italy. Tanganyika and the Congo were given to Belgium. Angola, Zambezi, and part of Madagascar were given to Portugal. The Gold Coast, now Ghana, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, Nigeria, Sudan, Egypt, British Somaliland, Uganda, British East Africa, Rhodesia, and South Africa were given to Great Britain. Some portions of Africa were also taken by Spain, being a major colonial imperialist at the time in Africa. These countries remained under the colonial dominance of the European forces for several years to come, and the vast mineral resources of the continent were exploited non-stop and exported through the sea to factories in Europe. At the conference, the modality for ownership of the territories was set, and one of the modalities agreed upon was that, quote, each European country that claimed possession over a part of Africa must bring civilization in the form of Christianity and trade to such territory, end of quote. African traditional rulers were made to sign documents in the form of treaties to signify their acceptance of the occupation of their territories by the European forces. Any traditional ruler who refused to sign the agreement was either dethroned and made to become a commoner at home or banished to slave plantations abroad. Some Native African entities resisted the occupation of their lands, but were soon overpowered by the imperialist forces, who were obviously more sophisticated and prepared for violent exchange of fire. It is important to note that most of the national boundaries that we have today in Africa are boundaries that were created artificially in the course of the partitioning of Africa. Some of the boundaries were created arbitrarily, with little or no regard for similarity in the people's way of life, geography, and culture. Most of the conflicts for control of resources in Africa have been traced to the imbalances that were created by the partitioning of 1884. These countries later gained independence from the imperialist forces, beginning from Ghana, which gained independence in 1958, followed by Nigeria, which gained independence in 1960, and a number of other countries that gained independence thereafter after many years of struggles. Indeed, the story of the partitioning of Africa by Europe will remain a subject of study in history for many years to come, and several questions will continue to trail the partitioning for many more years also to come. Africa is free from colonialism today to the extent that there is no country that is governed by a foreign power. But the sad reality is that Africa is still largely dependent on the outside in many ways, beginning from economy to military support to intelligence gathering to education and many other indices. Many have traced these to the aftermath of the many years of colonial dominance before independence, and also traced it to corruption on the part of African leaders. It is the fervent prayer of many that Africa shall one day and soon be truly independent and be the master and controller of its vast mineral resources, through which the fortunes of the continent is expected to improve. Thanks for watching this edition of Africa in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video.